Grazie. Vorrei iniziare proprio con questo applauso a loro.
Very well, so let's start with this big applause to these young people who are at the heart of our future and who also helped us very much to make sure that today's conference would be taking place without any problems. So thank you to all of you for being with us and for your wonderful work.
Allora, io parlerò
Okay, I will be speaking Italian and English, switching back and forth. My name is Laura Orestano. I am part of the big team that John Danilo mentioned that places the human being at the center, the community, as well as a new form of economy. And I am in charge of SocialFare, which is the first center for social innovation in Italy. I wish to thank you for being with us also this afternoon. So many people here. It's such a good audience. This panel is called Develop and Scale, because, as we heard this morning, developing is important. Without development, there's no growth, and the scale dimension follows. But development means removing barriers. I totally agree with what Paolo Venturi said this morning. I wish to introduce very briefly all our panelists to you. Raji Kottamasu from Public Policy Lab in New York. Maria do Carmo Pinto from a social innovation bank from Portugal. Kunal Parikh, Social Innovation Lab, Baltimore. Davide Canavesio, who is the coordinator of the Strategica Turin group. Mauro Busa, who is the vice president of Lega Coop Piemonte, and a member of the Alliance of Italian Cooperatives, and Lorenzo Allevi, who is the CEO of Oltre Venture. We'll be starting this debate, this session, with just a few words that will be useful to hear what's going on at an international level. We'll be hearing from their experience, and then we'll be giving you the floor, opening the floor up to questions to see if you have any questions or thoughts that you want to share with our guests.
To Raji Kottamasu, who is Design Fellow at Public Policy Lab. And Raji, I would like that you talk about Public Policy Lab, what that is about, and what actually you are doing with public institutions and the role of Public Policy Lab New York vis-a-vis social innovation.
Thank you. So, as Laura said, my name is Raj Kottamasu, and I'm a design fellow at the Public Policy Lab, which is a public interest organization, a nonprofit or charitable organization based in New York, founded in 2011. And we recruit design and social science practitioners to work on teams partnering exclusively with US government agencies. Right now we're focused specifically on New York City and federal government agencies. And we use that word partnership very intentionally. We do not think of our government agency partners as clients, but as partners, partners in the work of improving public services for the general public, who we think of as our true clients. And so there are a few ways that we make explicit that partnership, that we underscore it. We first require a high level of buy-in to this process from those partner agencies, that there are senior decision makers who provide authorization to these processes, these projects, so that when we're proceeding with this work, we know that we have the capacity to recommend change processes that will be implemented at high levels of these agencies. We also require of them that they commit member staff to our project teams to work with the designers and social scientists, to share their expertise from working within those agencies, as well as to gain expertise in using design approaches to address public service delivery. And then we finally require that they allow us to publish on these projects. We don't sign away our intellectual property rights. We don't sign non-disclosure agreements. We don't operate as a traditional consultant in this way, because what we want to do is be able to share this information, share this work with the public, and be able to participate in a dialogue about expanding the use of design processes as they can apply to government services. So the modalities that we've found to be useful and that we've employed are the methodologies of service design, which it would take too long to sort of go over what all service design is, but the key components of service design that we have found really valuable include that it is user-centered, that this process starts with the citizen, whereas most services, at least in the United States, are designed around the constraints and capacities of the commissioning agency. Service design is also co-creative, so we engage this process not only with these public sector partners, the government agency, but also with users themselves. So our products come out of a process that involves all of these different stakeholders. It's visual, it's iterative, so we produce visual material that represents the work that we are actually doing so that we can all engage with it, touch it, understand what we're talking about in a common visual language, as well as iterative. So we go through a number of different iterations of these processes of developing whatever these design products are before they ever reach public implementation. So ideally, they're more effective and more robust for that process. This process is time sensitive, or it's time-based. It thinks about the whole user journey of receiving that service delivery. And because it's time-based, it's also holistic. It considers not only the user's experience, but also the service provider's experience, the whole back end, all of the policy decisions that undergird and frame out the context for that service delivery. And our work proceeds in 3 phases: a discovery phase, a design phase, and a piloting and evaluation phase. So in that first phase, the work is really identifying who are these users, what are their preferences, and what are their needs should this service be improved. The second phase, the design phase, is where we do that co-creation. We develop these rapid prototypes, sometimes of the artifacts that will actually come out of this process, like a visual artifact, like a new website, or a hard copy material. But more often, and probably more importantly, we're prototyping new modes of interaction, new ways for these public agencies to interact with the citizens that they're trying to reach. And then we move on to plan pilots, trying to recommend to those agencies how to actually implement those recommendations in the world. And then finally, our third phase is an evaluation phase, which we find to be very important, and we're just sort of entering into that work right now, which is to determine both how well that government agency was able to implement our recommendations, and also how well that implementation met our original design objectives. So I have 2 case studies to present. The first one, we worked with the New York City Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development on this project to answer this question: how do we help more eligible people apply for affordable housing? So it's not just how do we help more people apply, because in fact right now there's 200,000 people every year who apply for affordable housing in New York City. So we don't just need more people to apply. We also wanted to help more eligible people apply, more people that actually met the qualifications to receive this public service of affordable housing. And I'll say also that all of this work is much better documented in this book, Public and Collaborative, that's available on our website, publicpolicylab.org. So who is HPD? The Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development. They work with nonprofit as well as private sector housing developers to develop market rate units, to put in more units in the market that meet the needs of low income and middle income residents of the city. And when we proceeded with our discovery process, actually, I'll talk a little bit about this as well. So we proceeded with our discovery process, and the area that seemed most ripe for intervention was this lottery and lease-up process. And so let me talk a little bit about the lottery system, because it might be a little unfamiliar. In the US, we have a great need for affordable housing, and in New York, we have an especially large need for affordable housing. But we don't have the demand to meet all of that supply. So what we actually have is a lottery through which people can enter their names, and they'll be selected not to necessarily receive that affordable housing, but to be screened for their eligibility for affordable housing. So that's a complicated process, and a lot of people have a lot of need on that front. And basically, HPD engaged us to make it clearer what people, to the users, what they were actually applying for, to improve their level of satisfaction in this process, and then also to provide clarification to them about what documentation they would need of their household size, of their income, and so on, if they happen to be selected for screening for eligibility. So this work proceeded first with a series of iterative design and research phases or workshops that we did with community-based organizations, with affordable and not-for-profit developers, with the constituents themselves, the users who had either applied for affordable housing in the past or plan to do so in the future. And out of that work emerged a series of user needs. There were 4. And from those needs, then, we made recommendations to the HPD of 4 pilot programs that they could implement to address those needs. The first of which was a series of outreach materials just outlaying what all of the different types of information were that different users needed. But then beyond that, we said these materials are only as useful as the modes for disseminating them are. So we have also recommended 3 new modes of disseminating these materials, not simply listing them as PDFs on a website, but also being on the ground and deploying those materials to the public at various points of engagement. That work is now in phase 3, and so we're beginning the evaluation on it, or we're in the middle of that evaluation. We released a preliminary evaluation plan, which is also available on the website, and these next phases of evaluation of both the process and the outcomes of this project should be online in the late summer or the early fall. The next case study is centered around work that we did with the New York City Department of Education around the school choice process. So I'll explain a little bit about what that is. Every year in New York City, there are 75,000 8th graders who are making a transition between middle school and high school. And when they go to high school, they don't just go to their local community school. In fact, what they do in our city is to apply to up to 12 schools of the 700 plus high school programs in the city, and then they're matched with one of those programs throughout the city. And that can also be a complicated process, especially for students for whom English is not a first language, for whom their families, English is not a first language, literacy might be lower in their family, their levels of access or their levels of agency or perceived agency within their realm of choices is low. And so this is a big issue about inequality as well. The people who actually have a lot of access and who have a lot of high achievement in their families or in their students specifically do much better in this process than other students who have sort of fewer resources to go on. So our task was to answer this question: what do families and students need to make more meaningful, engaged, informed choices? And we did, again, a comprehensive ethnography of various types of constituents and stakeholders in this process: students, policymakers, guidance counselors, parents, in homes, offices, schools. And out of that work, we determined that there were 3 major players in this process: the student, the family, and the guidance counselor, each playing different roles in the process. And all of these students sort of fall along various need spectrums and come from different contexts. And again, we unearthed this set of shared needs among all of these stakeholders, within the students, within the families, and within the guidance counselors. These were the robust 4 needs that we identified. And then we made these recommendations, these prompts to the Department of Education. Like in this case, participants want sorting tools so they can judge if schools match their preferences. We made 30 such prompts to the Department of Education, hoping that that would spur further design work. This is still just our discovery phase. And you can see we also generated some potential responses that might suit this type of prompt. OkCupid-style matchmaking website for schools, print-on-demand mini directories, things like that. One of the outcomes from this process that actually did happen was, this, this app challenge that the Department of Education undertook. This challenge sort of rested on that discovery work and basically created an opportunity for developers to develop 6 different apps in sort of collaboration with, co-creation with some of these students and families that address these sorting challenges of moving through all those 700 high school options. And so I'll just speak a little bit about the challenges of working with government on all of these fronts. One is to just address that immediate case. We also proposed a series of non-app-based solutions, procedural, analog solutions. These were a lot harder to sell to this government agency. It was a lot easier for them to buy into the idea of an app being developed because that didn't necessarily have to scale up their staffing or their capacity. They could sort of layer on this, this digital capability as well. And that's happened again and again in this work, is sort of having a challenge of meeting both the user needs as well as the government agency's sort of limitations on its capacities and resources. I'll say also on that same front that finances can be a challenge. These government agencies do not have a ton of money to lavish on these projects, and so what that means is that we've relied on institutional partnerships and grants to supplement and support that work as well. And by necessity, that also means that the organization remains small, and we work on this fellowship model where practitioners are cycled in and cycled out on different projects, which is great in that it contributes a lot of energetic dynamism to that process, but also requires then a lot of getting up to speed on common and shared procedures, understanding how the process works. There are further challenges about intransigency in government thinking, especially among middle management or executive level decision makers, where changing a policy or changing a program takes a lot of work, takes a lot of will on their part. And then on the public side, I think, as well as on the government side, there is some skepticism about the ability of government to make these types of changes. And then further in the US, and I'm just sort of spelling out all of these, in the US we also have some challenges, especially from the right, to whether or not public services have a legitimate role in the first place, whether the government should really be spending all of these resources in serving the public, in doing all of these things for the public. And so all of these concerns also weigh in on that issue of publicity, our desire or our need or a requirement to publish our work. These government agencies then become a little bit more leery about the idea of making public the fact that there is a service that potentially could be improved. Recognizing that there is a service that needs improvement admits to a service failure, and then also raises the stakes for improving it quickly and measurably. And so we deal with all of that stuff, and at the same time, we have made quite a lot of progress. And this work is reasonably new in the US, and we remain hopeful and positive about the outcomes of the work so far, as well as the growth of it, in part in support, due to the support of worldwide agencies and nonprofit organizations that are working on service design for the public sector. And so I look forward to talking some more about those opportunities and that chance for growth.
Thank you, Raji. We shall have another round of questions later on. Now I would like to give the floor to Maria do Carmo Marques Pinto. She is chairman at Operational Council Social Innovation Bank. I know that the Social Innovation Bank is a comprehensive program addressing societal needs in Portugal. Maria, could you tell us more about that, and more specifically, how the Social Innovation Bank was funded and created?
Yeah. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here. It's the first time I visit Turin. I will try to keep brief. I don't need it, thank you. Then afterwards, if we have questions or if my intervention is sufficiently provocative, then we can have a dialogue. Okay. So, if I can have the second page. So, I come from Portugal. I'm a lawyer, specialized in European affairs. So for me, social innovation is something that came into my way. I didn't went for social innovation. I didn't knew what it was about social innovation. So when I came to Portugal after 25 years working abroad, mainly in Brussels and in Barcelona, I went to my country because my country, I thought it would need help from everybody to face the enormous challenges, social, political, economical. So everybody was needed. This was my motivation. So when I arrived to Portugal, I was invited to join an institution, a social institution, a charity, perhaps the most important charity in Portugal, private one, the oldest one. It is 500 years old, with Catholic roots. And I was asked to implement the program of entrepreneurship and social innovation. I didn't know how to start and where to start, because I didn't know what social innovation was. And I believe that I don't know if I know more now than I knew 1 year ago. Because everybody has a definition of social innovation. Everybody has its approach to social innovation. I don't know even if we would all here in this room agree what social innovation is for. But mainly what has driven us in this charity called Santa Casa da Misericórdia, so a very awkward, at least internationally, if you translate it into English, it is called the Holy House of Mercy. It doesn't make sense for you. It makes sense for us. It's one of the oldest institutions that practiced social innovation in Portugal since 500 years ago. So it survived throughout these centuries because it made social innovation. It was mainly and constantly innovating in relation to the social needs, social problems of the country. So when I was asked to put into execution a program of social innovation, we had to face how do we do this? How do we do this? Where do you start when you have to implement a program of social innovation? So in Portugal, for us, social innovation, it's about change. Change political institutions, economic institutions, cultural institutions, education, civil society, citizenship. Because if you want to change something in my country, you must change everything. You cannot change only housing. You cannot change only homeless. You cannot only change people having disabilities. Because when you face one problem, you see that you have to change the whole system. So the Social Innovation Bank was founded with this mission, a systemic change. It's not about only social affairs or citizenship, it is about everything. It is a comprehensive program, it is a comprehensive movement, if you want. So, you see, we address all these axes because we believe that if you don't address all these axes, you cannot solve problems. If you don't start by education, by culture, you have to, children have to have a different attitude towards the problems. And in my country, everybody believes that the state or whoever, there is always someone that is going to change to solve the problems. So we don't have the culture of entrepreneurship, we don't have a culture of solving problems. So this is a systemic problem. You have to face it. But you cannot change mentality of children in 1 year, 2 years. You have to have a comprehensive program of a decade, at least. So the Social Innovation Bank addresses the problems at their roots and from the beginning and without a timetable. We don't have an end. It is an ongoing mission. So starting by culture and education and having a new citizenship attitude towards the problems. I believe, or we believe, that in my country, it is because the civil society has it's not empowered. People don't believe that they can change. So you have to empower people. People have to believe that they can change the system. They can change wherever you are, you can change things. So you have to start throughout the country convincing people that there where you are, you can change things. This is the first step. The second step is about creativity. If you don't believe that people have ideas, imagination, and can go from imagination and creativity to innovation and to find solutions, if you don't promote creativity, if you don't find frameworks where people can discuss ideas, have new ideas, disruptive ideas, and then start from ideas into real change. So creativity is a word that we don't use in Portugal. We don't know what it's creativity. We believe, or people believe, that creativity is inspiration, and it is not. You have to have good ideas and then turn them into change. So we have a program addressing the operational part of creativity. Social experimentation. We believe also that public policy in the area of addressing social problems or has to be experimented and has to be systematically experimented. If you don't experiment, you will not be, you don't know if public policy will be a good one. So we started the systematic introduction of social experimentation. And at the time we are conducting an experimentation in the field of unemployment by experimenting if it is good to create new companies with senior qualified unemployed people and junior or young qualified unemployed. We are putting them together and seeing if you can use the senior experience and the junior energy to create companies. But you have to experiment it. Otherwise you won't know if there is the need for a public policy. And public policy in my country, at least, was never experimented. It went out a box of a politician or a political party without experimenting. So we are using public resources without knowing if they are useful or not. Afterwards, this morning, it was about social enterprises, social business, capitalistic companies. We believe that you have to move from a capitalistic company into something that has a social purpose, a general interest purpose, but it has to be sustainable. And this is the model we are promoting in Portugal. We have, our social economy is very big, a lot of institutions, a lot of very small initiatives, unsustainable, but they are of general interest. So what we have to do is to create a legal framework for these initiatives to still continue to be of general interest, but be sustainable. Otherwise, if they rely only on public funding or donations, when the crisis comes, you don't have social answers. So the beneficiaries will be the first that will suffer the consequences. So our main intervention is to create a social business community. Without money, you don't do anything. So without social investment, you won't be able to develop this whole program. There is enough money in the economy, but the distribution of resources has to be different. So we want to gather the necessary financial resources to invest in this social economy. This is why we are promoting the creation of new instruments in Portugal, social investment funds that will be able to pursue this program. Without money, you don't do anything. We have, of course, a center for social experimentation. If you don't have a place where you can have people having ideas, develop ideas, come together and experiment, where you can develop social entrepreneurship, you lack something. So we created an important center for social experimentation where we develop all our activities. It is in the center of Lisbon, so it has enough place to have together all these initiatives. Finally, if we want to address a systemic, if we want to have a systemic plan or a systemic program, we have to be everywhere in Portugal. And just like Indy said this morning, you have to be where problems are. It is very nice to be in Lisbon, in the center of Lisbon, but where you address, where you have the problems is in the interior of Portugal. There you have underdevelopment, local entities that need that you go there and together with the local authorities and local institutions to promote also this change. So we create what we call operational platforms. We are going to create, we have already one in Porto, where we have gathered the main institutions in Porto, and we developed this program. So it is an ongoing process, and we want to introduce change at all levels with this kind of program. You have a diagram. It's a virtuous circle where you have to do it all. If you don't do it all, for us it will be of no use. So for us it is about finding also a new governance, because I come from a private institution and we have 27 partners. Within these partners we have public authorities, we have municipalities, but we are the promoters. So the platform we created is a collaborative, informal platform. Now this is a new form of governance. It is not recognized, but this is going to be, I believe, the future is these, or are these informal platforms. And this creates a problem of legitimacy. I am not legitimate to make change. I was not empowered, I was not elected. So I cannot make official change, but I can make informal change. But I have no formal configuration. So at one, we will have to face democracy problems, because if our platform is going to promote change, at one step someone can ask me, and you are not legitimate to do it. I'm able to do this because I come from a very important institution and I can aggregate others and we can introduce change. But at some time I have to answer this question, that who gave you the legitimacy to make institutional change, economic change, cultural change? So I think social innovation, it is about politics. It is not only about addressing isolated problems. At some stage, you have to answer the question, what is the political framework for change? And this, I believe, it's the real question of social innovation, and is the question that I am interested in. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. This is actually also the model we are trying to adopt here little by little at SocialFare, meaning trying to become an open collaboration platform. So actually to generate bottom-up legitimacies also for the so-called social peripheries that come to the center, and that is also our way of considering the concept of social renaissance, people at the center, and an open collaboration platform. Now I would like to give the floor to Kunal Parikh. He is Executive Director at the Social Innovation Lab in Baltimore. Kunal is a serial entrepreneur and philanthropist dedicated to leveraging science, policy, and social enterprise as tools to comprehensively improve public welfare. Kunal will talk us about the Social Innovation Lab in Baltimore, and then we go from there. Thank you.
I really liked one thing from her talk was to change one thing, you have to change everything. That's really powerful, I think. Anyways, my name is Kunal. I came from the USA, from Baltimore, Maryland, where I run the Social Innovation Lab, which is an incubator for social enterprises in Baltimore. How many of you have heard of Baltimore? By raise of hands. How many of you have been to Baltimore? A couple. So if you've been to Baltimore, you know that there is no better place in the United States for a social innovation lab than Baltimore. And so here we are. In Baltimore, Maryland, the city is very, very important, and it's integral to all the work that we do in the United States. And so if you ask someone in 1960, what is Baltimore like? They would say, it's a hub, it's a commerce hub, it's a shipping hub, it's a manufacturing powerhouse. At this time, Baltimore was one of the top 10 cities in the United States. It was a premier city. This is where all the goods came to in the United States. Today, it's a very different picture. Today, if you ask someone, what is Baltimore like, they will tell you about crime. And I love Baltimore, but there are several issues that Baltimore still has to face and still has to get through. Crime is one of them. Baltimore is in the top 10 in the United States in crime. 25% of citizens in Baltimore are in poverty. That's 1 out of 4 citizens in Baltimore are living in poverty. And there are issues with race, there are issues with access to education, with access to healthcare. So there are a number of these things that we're looking to solve. And we feel that social innovation, social enterprise provides us the means to do that. And one other thing, so when you think of Baltimore, there's one other really big thing that people usually think of, and that's Johns Hopkins University. Johns Hopkins is one of the premier medical research and hospitals in the world. And what's interesting is this hospital is built right in the center of Baltimore, right in the center of these vacant homes, right in the center of where there are 4,000 homeless people, is this amazing institution. And so just take a look at these stats. Hopkins has $6.5 billion a year in operating revenue. Every year from the federal government, they receive almost $2 billion in research money to develop new cures, new therapies. They have over 21,000 students. These are some of the most brilliant students in the entire US and from around the world who come to Hopkins to pursue their degrees. And so for decades, Hopkins has been a leader in research, in science, in discovery. There are Nobel Prize winners. But it hasn't been a leader in translating these discoveries into impactful technologies that can help someone in the clinic. And so these are some numbers. So for 13 years, only 66 companies have come out of the university. And that's with $2 billion of research funding every single year. And let's assume that 75% of those fail. That impact is almost negligible. And so for us, this is our opportunity. And we said, how can we harness and leverage the resources at this university, these amazing students and faculty members, the amazing research and discovery and technology and ideas that's left sitting in a lab? How do we make sure that's helping people right down the street, right across the corner? And so that's what we built the Social Innovation Lab to do, is really to take these technologies, take these ideas, and empower people to help others with these things. And so I'll tell you a little bit about our model. So our model starts, number one, it has to be a significant problem. If there is no fundamental need, we won't do something just to publish a paper. We won't do something just to make a couple of bucks. There has to be a significant need and a fundamental problem. And if there is, this is our model. We take disruptive technologies. For example, this past year, in Maryland, it costs $5,000 for a hearing aid. In Maryland, 80% of older adults cannot afford a hearing aid because they're $5,000 and it takes several weeks to get one. We developed technologies that allow us to sell these hearing amplifiers for $50 and fit them within 1 hour. So we take these disruptive technologies, we pair them with young, tireless innovators who are determined to have an impact and who are determined to have success. And we apply mission-driving business models. We don't care whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit. The business model needs to sustain the mission of the organization. That's all that matters. So they can ultimately have the impact it does. And when you combine these things, we create social enterprises that are capable of solving significant problems in a sustainable fashion. In 3 years, so we've been around for 3 years, we've incubated 33 companies. And so our model is they have to have a problem and they have to have a solution, and those things need to be clear-cut. And if they do, we bring them in, we provide them with seed funding, grant funding. We don't take any equity, it's all grant funding. We provide them with free legal design and other services. We give them training, and we built a full year-long curriculum for these students, faculties, and community members to make sure they know exactly how to start a company. They know lean startup concepts. They know how to market a social enterprise. They know how to talk to a venture capitalist. And we provide them with mentorship, the most invaluable of these 4 things. And this has already allowed us to tackle some amazingly difficult problems in education, in access to healthcare. Even things like bioinformatics, where we're empowering researchers to develop cures more efficiently and with less price and faster. So across the board. And what's really, really exciting about this is that these companies are already starting to have an impact in Baltimore, a tangible impact. They're also creating jobs. These companies have already raised multi-millions of dollars in just a span of 3 years. And the kicker for us is that we've spent less than $30,000 to get that return. This is something that anyone can do. You can do this in Torino, you can do this in any city. It's just a model and having talented people who are driven and finding those people. So we ourselves are a startup, and we're also figuring out how do we develop and how do we scale. We've had some impact, and we want to continue to increase that. So on the local level, we're developing partnerships with other universities, other institutions to further our reach, but also provide more capabilities and more opportunities for our incubatees. In addition, we're also going across borders. So we're working globally to develop a social innovation lab in China and be the first social innovation lab there in Nanjing University. And we're looking at exploring other global opportunities, maybe here in Italy at some point. On the other side, what we've seen is that a lot of our companies, they've seen a specific problem. So one is a doctor, and he saw someone who's overweight and obese, and he wants to solve that problem. And so usually people find these specific problems that they've seen, that they've heard about, and they want to solve those problems. But these problems might not be the most pressing problems for Baltimore. They might not be the most important problems to solve. So right now we're working with the city, government, with universities, and with foundations in Baltimore to identify what are the most pressing challenges in Baltimore and have them provide us with the need and the guidance, and we provide the people and the process to start really solving these problems in Baltimore, one by one. But the thing I think is really interesting is when we talk about develop and scale, when the Social Innovation Lab talks about develop and scale, we don't talk about startups. When we talk about develop and scale, we talk about people. Because I think ultimately the social enterprises that we're creating are these people. These are the ultimate, their lives are the ultimate social enterprises. These companies, we've had companies that have failed. In this past year, we had 3 companies that failed. But those students, those teachers, those faculty members, they are now social entrepreneurs. They have abilities, they have skills, they have experiences that they'll continue to take with them for the rest of their lives, longer than they ever would have run a single company. And so for us, this is really, when we talk about grow and scale, it's building people and giving them the skills, the opportunity, and the focus to have an impact, and hopefully they stick around in Baltimore. And I think that'll do a ton of good to make Baltimore a better place in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And we hope we can also enlarge this approach with you, maybe also in Italy. Now, ora è il turno di Davide.
Now it's Davide Canavesio's turn. Davide is a coordinator of the Commission for Economic Development of Strategic Metropolitan Plan Torino Strategica. He is also an entrepreneur in the steel and iron sector, and he is director of Science Group. I would like to ask you a question.
Strategica. Social
Torino Strategica, social innovation. Now, Turin, but Piemonte as a region at large. How is Torino Strategica and its plan, how is it welcoming, integrating the suggestion, the questions of social innovation, and how does it use it to generate development and scalability?
I will switch into English then. First of all, thank you for inviting me here. Before answering, a small disclaimer. I was impressed this morning and also now about every speech, because everybody has come here to bring what they've been doing, the results that they achieved or they are achieving. I will be talking about something that maybe will happen in the future, so it's not something I've done yet. And by the way, not something that I will be doing in the future, but I will ask others to do. So when I combine these two features, so not having done anything yet and asking others to do that maybe in the future, there comes to me one profession, that is the politician. But I'm not a politician by training, I'm an entrepreneur selling products, hard products. So I will give my best shot at it with this disclaimer, having done this disclaimer. I'm here also to learn, and by the way, to take business cards for later, for Torino. So what is Torino Strategica and what we've been doing in Torino Strategica? Torino Strategica 2025 is the third effort, and this is why I'm talking in English for the non-people of Torino, is the third effort after 20 years of the city of Torino and the region surrounding to sit down, not only the politician, but with the civil society, and to try to understand where the city is going in the future. We've been working 1 year already on that. We've been involving more than 300 people. That is not just people passing by on the road, but it's people that is actually working in the city, is having a role, and making a huge effort, especially in a time like now, in a time of crisis, making a huge effort to think what the city will be and the territory will be in 10, 15 years. Torino has an interesting history because it was once a one-factory town. It's a city that went through heavy transformation. Sounds a little bit like the history of Baltimore or other cities, Pittsburgh, Detroit, other cities also in the States and in Europe, by the way. But now, from being a company town to move, we had the Olympics, and to be a multi-vocational city, we are now facing a question which is, okay, so what's next? Where are we going to be in the next 10 years? And it's not enough to say, yes, we switched the last 20 years, because the world is moving faster. So we started to think about the plan, and I will not be telling what the plan will be, but what are two key assumptions, so I'm answering to the question. First assumption that we had, and those, by the way, are strong, ideological, if you will, assumption, because we are not paid to solve the problem of the world. By the way, we are not paid at all, but we are not paid to solve the problem of all the city, but we are paid our time to find certain solutions. So, first of all, first assumption, the plan will not be telling what are the sectors on which the city will bet. We're not saying, okay, will be automotive, will be, I don't know, tourism, will culture. No. We are focusing much more on the enabling factor. We want Torino to be an attractive city for students, tourism, investment, companies, attractive. Now, I know that this is less sexy to sell rather than to say, you know, we are the best town in the world for this. But it's complicated to forecast in the future where you will be and what will be the sector. So we are focusing on the enabling factor. Second, social. We also took the decision, and I'm very strong on it, and I saw that it came also from the debate of today, not to put social and welfare somewhere in a box, as it most of the time is, social innovation, welfare. So everybody says, okay, we have the economy, we have to do this and this is the, by the way, there's also the welfare we have to take care about. There's also, yes, let's do it social innovation because it's cooler to call it like that. And then we add on the other things. So one strong assumption is not to have a chapter on social innovation and on welfare, but to fully integrate this in the plan. How? One, we have 3 legs to make Torino, say, more attractive. One is what we call Torino Facile. Torino Facile is easy Torino, meaning though you are in Italy, you have the bureaucracy and it's complicated, in Torino, relatively, it could be easier by doing a certain set of things, which, by the way, are very concrete things that we are working on. We put public sector, private sector together, and without asking for reforms. That's another super abused word that we use, which should be banished sometimes. Anyway, without asking for new laws, for reforms, for other things, just by changing small organizational things, you're shortening the times for investment. That's one small thing, but that's one thing. The second thing, we call it Capitale Torino. So we are you have to understand, if you're not from Torino, that we have this ancient memory. Once we were the capital of Italy. So anytime we have an initiative, we say we are the capital of movies, we are the capital of food, because we like the word capital. Huh? Forgive us. And it's nice to know it. But so we have an initiative that is not Torino Capitale, but it's Capitale Torino, meaning human capital for Torino, as the human capital is key. And there we have a set of action that we're working. Then we have a third initiative that I want to talk about. That's where social would fit. That it's called Destinazione Torino, Torino Destination. Destinazione Torino is a program where you have more things to attract more investment, smart investment in the city. So an agency to attract, tutorship, mentorship, a lot of things that are here. And then we have one thing that is not in a box for social, that is to create an incubator and accelerator for social innovation and civic tech in particular. Now, it's not the most brilliant idea of the world, because we've been listening that there are other cases. But there are 2, 3 things that might be of interest in the debate. The first is the assumption. We don't put it in a box, in a separate box that takes care about welfare and social. But we want it as one of the key pillars to make Torino more attractive. So we believe that if we have that, we are not solving the problem of welfare, but we're making the city more attractive, because we believe it has to be in the mainstream. Also from the debate of this morning, what should this thing be combining? First of all the technology. We have 2 of the best universities in Italy. We have the Politecnico, that is highly ranked. We have the excellent incubators, the words for startup. So just recently, we were on the news as the capital in Italy for startups. You know that the word capital always pops up, no? With 200 innovative startups. That is fantastic, was by design, is not by chance, and it happens because we have a strong manufacturing background and we have a strong technology history of innovation. Now, what we want to do is combine this with, of course, the needs of the social and innovation, of the needs of the welfare. Torino has in its DNA a lot of social innovation. This morning you had a fantastic display here, and it's just a part of it. Torino, from the history, from the social sense, from everything that we do, is interesting for that. But we need to do a step forward, which is combining this with the possibility to create social entrepreneurship, the possibility to create startups that with technology work on the social part. I'm not neglecting the role of cooperatives. I'm not neglecting this. It's a part of the equation. The other part is to combine this in the mainstream. If you go to manufacturing, I'm a manufacturer myself, and you ask me, I sell products that harden metals for automotive, so I'm far away from, but it's not immediate to the jump to say, okay, is my technology helpful to be doing something that could help sorting the problems, certain problems? If you think carefully, yes, but you need some stimulus, or to be a little bit crazy, but you need some stimulus there. So this is what Torino Strategica wants to do. The other thing, and here I'm talking more to the people of Torino and Piemonte that are present, is I'm fully against it, so the civic tech incubator, to be a public initiative. In the plan, we are just saying that we should focus the resources from foundation to banks to manufacturing to the association towards this initiative. But it needs to be an initiative that is born in the territory, that is not public. Otherwise, we go back to the ancient loop to put public funding for certain initiatives. I'm a big fan of things that if the market, even though you give a jump start, could be a seed, could be certain things, is happy to buy, even though it's a lower price, then are things that are acceptable. Otherwise, are just public money going to a new initiatives. Again, just to close, I don't want to go too long, and I'm more interested in a debate. This roundtable is about develop and scale. Why it fits then Torino Strategica within this context? There are a lot of initiatives that are doing social innovation in Torino, so you don't need Torino Strategica. But you need some collective thinkings in having an environment, a system, that if somebody wants to scale up, if somebody wants to plant a seed that can grow and is sustainable, then the system around, there's one place, not necessarily a physical place, but there's one place that they can go to. And so that's what we're trying to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Davide. It reminds me of what we heard this morning. I refer particularly to the talk given by Alison Hewitt from Mars, when she said that actually at Mars, divergences converged, and they brought diversities in a sort of convergence place where to thrive and to generate development and scalability in a cross-sectorial way. I think that is a quite interesting model. Now again, I will switch into Italian and apologize with my fellow panelists. Vorrei presentarvi Mauro Busa.
And now I'd like to introduce to you Mauro Busa, who is Vice President of Lega Coop for Piedmont and a board member of the Cooperative Initiative at Piedmont. And it's with this hat that he will be addressing this audience today about the word of cooperatives in Piedmont and the role in terms of innovation as well that's been played by social cooperatives, which has been the backbone of the Italian economy, especially in the past few years. We'll also hear about some specific cases that he has come across in his life. With me, I can barely speak English good enough to order dinner abroad, so you'll have to bear with me, and I will be speaking Italian. I will not have any theoretical approach. I am a very practical cooperator, and as such, I will be talking about what I do. I will offer you a very rapid overview of why, in my view, cooperatives can play an important role for social innovation. The Alliance of Cooperatives is one of the coordinating institutions in Italy, especially in this region in Piedmont. Just to give you an idea of what kind of numbers we're talking about 1,900 cooperatives, about 1,060,000 members, 56,000 people working with the cooperatives. And In 2011, the overall value of production was about 13 million, which is more or less the GDP of this region alone. However, there's another aspect that I wish to underscore here. Based on the evaluations and the analyses that we have carried out, there has been a reduction in profit margins, the erosion of capital, because over the past few years, of course, we have been bleeding out in terms of money. Well, we have not lost people. Therefore, employment rates remain steady, and that is a good sign. Of course, this is one of the core values of cooperative initiatives. That is to say, of course, cooperatives value their members very highly. We heard about resilience, and we wondered why are cooperatives so resilient. Well, I have my own idea on that. However, I decided to go and see what the Industrial Commission of the European Parliament wrote last year for a draft proposal. And according to the European Parliament, 160,000 cooperatives in Europe have contributed significantly to overcoming the crisis in an extraordinary way, non-ordinary way. And this for a number of reasons. First of all, because they adjust to change, because they can ensure continuity of operation. And these characteristics come from the nature of cooperatives themselves, the fact that members are actually the owners of cooperatives. Then an intergenerational approach, so that we are required by law to set aside part of our profits, and then the connection that is created between the community and the local territory, which of course entails a close connection between the social and the economic dimensions of our work. This is what the Parliament says. What I can tell you is that when the going gets tough, cooperatives get down to business, really. So that's what happens. This is our approach to the market. This is the approach of cooperatives to the economic crisis. In terms of social innovation, I had a very interesting challenge awaiting me, because I wanted to have a clear picture of what is going on. And I can tell you that cooperatives work in the social sector, even if they're not, technically speaking, socially oriented cooperatives. Any cooperative works or can somehow make a difference on a social level, and that's the first point. Secondly, something I want to share with you as a sort of wish on my part. If you're not familiar with the concept of social innovation, as we heard from our Portuguese colleague, the concept of social innovation is not so intuitive after all. It's not so clear after all. When it becomes mainstream, it will also bring with it the consideration of funding, of course, funding that comes from structural funds in the case of Italy. So it would be very useful to have a better definition and a better qualification of this expression. Clearly, innovation is a very wide concept, a flexible one. However, I would say that some efforts at clarifications would be very useful. I tried, however, to map some of the experiences that we believe are creative answers to needs that, after all, are the traditional needs of people, because I'm afraid needs remain pretty much the same. Services, health services, food, sleeping well, having a roof above our heads. So that doesn't really change. I heard something that was very interesting this morning about the fact that what we do is social innovation is not to do only with the poorest of the poor. Social innovation is about anyone and everyone. So marginalization is only part of the issue, I would say. So the entrepreneurial system is complex. It's made up of smaller and bigger players. It's a market that has its own weight, and it has its assets. I did not start with what our cooperatives are doing, but I rather focused on needs that came up and that we addressed. For example, home-based care, nurses, or other kinds of assistance that was provided by one specific cooperative operating according to the needs of households and specific families in a very specific territorial area. Housing has become an emergency in some cases. Many people have serious problems because maybe for a short period of time, they have no house, they have no place to live in. So they have come up with the idea of a housing cooperative, a social housing. They have renovated a farmhouse. They have created in this way 23 housing units that are rented out for free by the local government to people who are in need and who are temporarily homeless. The needs that we identified also included young people. The public service is no longer able to address this issue, and so there's a social cooperative who addresses this issue through a family group counseling program. So they bring together social workers and family members and anyone who has a role in the life of these young people, and their goal is to create what they call the Book of Wishes, the Book of Wishes of the young person, of the family, of what remains of the family, so that they define their needs and then move on and try to address how best to achieve these goals, to make these wishes come true. There are cooperatives like Pausa Café and Nuova Spes who, for example, produce food products. So one works in jail, in prison with inmates. The other works with handicapped people, the disabled, and there are other cooperatives as well that are very active to address the issue of unemployment, for example, by addressing the issue of co-working in order to bring down start-up and micro-enterprising costs. And indeed, these cooperatives are proving very successful also in terms of contamination of ideas, as well as in financial terms. Very lastly, one more example that is a bit more complex and that leads us to an interesting aspect, and this case specifically deals with the health system. It's quite peculiar. In one of the towns just outside Turin, Settimo, there's a hospital that was initially conceived as a private nursing home with French investors. Then it was absorbed by the regional health system, and among the shareholders there's a religious social cooperative which has become the supplier of health-related services, but also the owner of the hospital itself. So they not only provide the services, but they also contribute to defining the strategies and the policies of this hospital. So their challenge here is to reconcile the public and the private dimensions, the territorial and the political aspects of this work, so as to come up with a sort of third party point of view, because it's not enough to just contribute the two different points of view. And with this, I'm done. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ora vorrei dare la parola a Lorenzo Allevi.
Now I'd like to give the floor to Lorenzo Allevi. Lorenzo Allevi is a CEO of Oltre Venture,
Amministratore di alcune.
and he's also a director of many other participated companies. Oltre Venture develops the so-called impact financing. Now, Lorenzo is going to explain what it is and how this new tool relates or can support a new model for its social innovation.
Grazie mille, buongiorno a tutti. La premessa è che...
Good morning. Well, good afternoon. I am very happy that I am here. I come from Milan, I'm not from Turin, but most of our funding in social innovations go to Turin. I believe in what Davide said before. It is true. Turin is fertile soil for this. Oltre Venture does impact investing. I'm not going to say what it is. We started in 2006 and we called it Patient and Responsible Capital to Invest in Social Needs. About 2-3 years ago, JP Morgan and the Rockefeller Foundation decided to call this approach impact investing. To us, this means making private and institutional investments which care for economic sustainability and still have a very significant, clear social impact, which is stated right from the beginning. We started in 2006 and we did about 16 investments in some areas, 17 investments in equity. So basically we invested in the risk capital of these startups. Out of these 17 investments, only 2 were existing companies. All the others are companies that we created. Some we didn't have social entrepreneurs at the time, worked based on our ideas. In other cases, we intercepted the ideas of especially young people who presented projects to us, and we helped them, we supported them with the equity. On the left, you can see some of the companies that we created. Very quickly, there's Sant'Agostino Medical Center. It now has 3 offices in Milan, and it has one characteristic. We offer first-level, good quality services at affordable prices. So those who come to us pay a first visit and they pay 50 to 60 euros. So it's more than a public service, but it's certainly lower than any private clinic. But it has the same quality. We're also active in microcredit. A 27-year-old guy from Turin came up with the idea. He's now 34 and has 4 kids. And I think that Per Microcredito is, to date, the most innovative microcredit initiative. We've now already given 10,000 microcredits all over Italy. Then we have sharing via Ivrea, which is an example of temporary social housing done in Turin with Foundation CRT and the municipality of Turin. We believe it is a great example of temporary social housing. It's working very well. When we opened it in 2011, we hosted temporarily 11,000 people. We also work with Concordia to develop a new model for the so-called protected rooms or accommodation for the elderly. So we offer the building, and in addition, we also offer a series of services. Now, all these startups were created with equity. Only two are cooperatives. Well, we've chosen this path because these projects required extra money, extra capital, and for us it's easier to collect capital if you're a capital society. We invested 7.5 million, and also our investments obtained about another 20 million euro from further investors. So let's say that we created new startups worth in total about 30 million euro. What is the context where we're working? We started in 2006 with a foundation. Myself and Luciano Babbo come from the world of finance, and we've always supported and financed companies. We then changed our sector, and for 4 years we worked as a foundation in order to understand the social area. We did social philanthropy, and we went around trying to understand how the sector worked. In 2006 we then stopped, and we thought that we believe that the field of social needs required an evolution. In our minds, when it comes to social needs, we have to keep in mind that this doesn't just include the poor ones, but also the so-called grey area of the population. We realized that there was a growing number of needs. The traditional welfare and so-called third sector, we believed, was not enough. First, because of the economic crisis, and also a crisis in terms of projects. And so we thought it was not enough to cover the needs. Privates, especially in the past, were not particularly interested in investment in this very risky sector with low yields. So what we tried to do was, on a very small scale, so we tried to fill the gap. So we tried to find a new model to meet social needs. And we believe that new models can arise from innovation. We had a simple idea. When there's a new entrepreneurial idea, well, they need to be supported through new models to give help. Of course, for a new entrepreneurial idea to arise, it takes an innovative entrepreneur who is able to understand needs. How do you attract new entrepreneurs? Well, we believe that the only tool that can really attract new entrepreneurs, we've discussed it with Professor Calderini, I think that you need to start from the offer. So you need to tell new entrepreneurs, look, if you have an idea, we have the money, we have the skills to help you out. So we believe that what it takes is money and managerial support. We created it through a tool, our own one, called venture capital. I'll try and make an example. Many of you already know it. So-called Silicon Valley started thanks to these tools. People who did venture capital. At the time, it was mainly public money. Now everybody talks about the Silicon Valley, and you know it attracts private capital, but the first money came from universities and from American states because the risk was too high. So far, we haven't managed to attract private money. We've attracted public money, but this is a further challenge in our field. Private money, you know, there's a lot of private capital. The amount of private money is 3 times the GDP in Europe and the US. 1/3 of this wealth is liquid, which is there, it's sitting there, and it's looking for the right investment. So our challenge is to demonstrate private people that it is possible to invest in social innovation with sustainable models, with a high social impact, with a lower risk than the technological risk. I believe that this is the difficulty, it's the challenge that we need to win in our field. It's not easy, but we will continue to work along this path. Our idea is to create a new fund supported by the European Fund for Investment. The European Fund for Investment pays a lot of attention to impact investment. Therefore, it's created a fund of funds. Now it's worth 95 million, which is, by the way, it's very good news is that by the end of the year it will reach 150 million, so that financial intermediaries can use this money to invest in social innovation. The European Fund has already stated 2 commitments. It's already promised money to 2 structures. The first one is a German one in Munich. So the fund has already committed 7 million euro. The second commitment is earmarked for Oltre Venture 2. After months of due diligence, we've been promised that we're going to receive 10 million euro if we manage to collect another extra 10 million euro to create this new fund worth in total 20 million euro. Of course, we're now searching for the extra 10, 12 million euro. It's very difficult, but we're doing quite well. And the areas, the fields where we would like to invest this money is and farming, by the way, is also very important. We believe it's extremely important, especially now. We need young people to go back to farming. It's important for job creation as well. So let's say that the areas where we're going to invest will be this one: social health services, education, social housing, temporary social housing. We believe that's extremely important, hostels or student houses or houses and buildings for the elderly and disadvantaged areas, which in Italy means especially the south of Italy. We would like to take capital to the south of Italy to create enterprises and farming, as well as I said, and abandoned public buildings and also buildings and assets which are seized from the mafia. We believe it's very important as well. So we will give our equity, our money as equity to the entrepreneurs who come to us with interesting projects. This is what we're trying to do in Italy today. Thank you very much.
Grazie Lorenzo.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
We have to speed up a little bit our session because there is one more event, I would say, within this quite full day. And it will be, of course, a nice announcement, I hope, that will be made quite soon. So without disclosing anything more and anything further, I would like just to make one more round, one question and one answer, meaning one word. Raji, if we were to put together a kind of charter for social renaissance, what would you put on the charter?
Equity.
Sorry?
Equity.
Equality. 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 Maria?
One word. The political framework.
Stakeholders.
Human capital. I had to use capital again, of course.
A good policy, una buona politica. La qualità delle persone.
Quality of people who will bring about social innovation and social renaissance.